All right, now we're going to turn to the Poseidon Principles. This is financing as an incentive for shipping decarbonization. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Michael Parker, Paul Taylor, and Kristin Holth. Welcome. Hey, Paul. Please have a seat. Michael, if you don't mind, we'll go ahead and start with you. So explain to us, oh, excellent, it's working, terrific. Explain to us what the Poseidon Principles are and what their purpose is.
I can do this in 60 minutes, 30 minutes, and 15, but you want it in 3 minutes. This is about responsible banks supporting responsible owners. This is not banks telling owners what to do. This is aligning the global financial community that supports this industry with the objectives of the global regulator. And it's very important that this is the IMO, it is not the European Union, the US Coast Guard. We are supporting a global industry in, as the Deputy Prime Minister said, the goal of cutting emissions by 50% based on 2008 by 2050. This is a collaborative effort, not just by the banks and my partners here who are on the drafting committee, but other banks in the room here who are signatories to the Poseidon Principles. But it was collaboration with owners and with cargo owners. So Maersk, Cargill, Euronav, and others were on the committee that came up with these principles. And what we're doing is we're saying we wish to align our portfolios with the goal of the IMO, whilst retaining what is very important to each of us, which is our confidential bilateral relationships with each ship owner. So this is not collusion between banks at all. The individual decisions about the business we do will remain exactly the same, but be informed by the environmental impact of those decisions over time. And we took the Equator Principles from 2003, which established the commitment by banks in project finance to report the transactions they did. What we're doing here is taking a moving target, because we know that the alignment will change over time, and therefore the decisions we make today will impact and will impact how aligned we remain. I think the important thing to also point out is this emanates not just under the auspices of the Global Maritime Forum, but from the G20 and the Financial Stability Board in 2015 under Mark Carney and Michael Bloomberg, setting out the Task Force for Climate Change Disclosure and a requirement on banks and industrial companies to report on the impact in their financial statements on their businesses. This is now at the forefront of bank regulators' minds. Now, what we are doing here, and we should all in this room be very proud of this, we are leading from the front. When we launched in June in New York, as Peter referred to, the environmental experts there and the NGOs asked other industries to take the lead or follow the lead that we took. And that is also what the banking regulators are now saying. They're saying, how can the Poseidon Principles be replicated for other industries? And I think we should all be proud of it, not just the banks, but also the owners and other parties in this room. Supporting the IMO is very important, but what we're doing is taking information that every owner will be required to provide on their emissions this year on every ship, applying that to the trajectory that the IMO publishes, making a calculation to our own portfolios, and reporting publicly, and this is very important, and transparently, how each of our portfolios is aligned, percentage-wise, aligned or misaligned, if you like, with that IMO trajectory. And that transparency is very important because it will mean that we have to take questions from our shareholders, from regulators, from anyone else about the business we are doing. Two very key points. The first one is this is not about auditing. This is about regulators wanting to know how we do business today. Climate change is at the forefront of the financial industry and its regulators, and that is something that has changed. The second thing is we will, as you will hear from the panel that follows us, we want our decisions about the business we do to be aligned with the investment decisions made by the industry. So we want to be supportive of the difficult decisions and research and development required to lead to the future industry. So we see our role as being responsible supporters of that. I do want to stress that confidentiality remains absolute, that none of the disclosure about the business we individually do around the individual loans or clients, none of that is disclosed, but we have to publish in our statements and on the website how aligned we are. And I think that that's very important, and that's what other industries, I think, will be asked to do in a similar fashion.
Ah, terrific. Let's go to Kristin next. So, Kristin, you were part of the Poseidon Principles drafting committee. So could you share with us how those principles were actually developed?
Thank you, Meredith. Yes, this is a drafting committee, and I think the fact that we managed to launch this in June, which was, and it started up in Hong Kong last year, is amazing. I think we all are proud that we managed to get that far. And I think one of the principles which is important in such a process is that the perfect cannot stop the good. That we didn't, when we launched in June, we didn't have all the answers, but we knew the direction. And I think that is really one of the core elements here, because we could debate for years, but we said we are aligning, as Michael said, to the IMO's requirements, to the information getting from the clients to IMO, and then we will convert that to our portfolios. So we have the direction we will go. We'll support the industry. And still a lot to be implemented. But the success of that kind of developing these kind of principles is also how we incorporate industry, third-party experts, GMF. It's not like a financial bubble worked out principles. It is something we worked on so we could be aligned with the targets also of the ship owners and the shipping industry.
Ah, terrific. Paul, 2 years ago, I don't think many of us would have believed that shipping would be a first mover in developing a global framework for responsible finance. What happened?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. No, it's quite a surprise, and no one would have expected that. And indeed, it is the first sector-specific climate alignment initiative. So, as Michael said, we should be proud of that. But I think it was quite surprising actually that it gained huge media attention. The launch in New York and the momentum subsequently as well has been quite impressive. Peter spoke earlier on about stepping up our efforts on sustainability, and you can add other words other than just sustainability to that, such as discipline, responsibility, and transparency. And the Poseidon Principles addresses all of those. Our ship owner clients are experiencing huge technological change in their business. We're talking here about new fuels, new ship designs, and taking on more risk. And we're all taking on more risk, and it's a combined responsibility. So the banks of those that have signed up have got together, and it's a collaboration, as we were discussing earlier on. So if you look at the shipping sector, the financing side, there's about $400 billion of senior debt in the market across 70 or 80,000 vessels, and that actually gives the banks a pretty loud common voice. So we would love all banks to sign up so it becomes a market standard, but by actually caring about the underlying asset that we finance is actually right. We should all care about the assets where we provide capital, whether it's equity, whether it's debt. So it's the right thing to do. It's the right time. And the banks that have signed up, by actually measuring the portfolios for carbon emissions and addressing that against the IMO trajectory, if we can actually manage our own portfolios correctly, and that, of course, that's now the aim, we have to do that, which means looking at the transactions on a portfolio, writing much more new business for greener vessels, greener technology. If we can all address that and we can all align ourselves and be compliant, that'll go a long way to the sector actually being compliant as well.
Well, absolutely, and this sector being a leader for other sectors who are looking to do likewise work. Terrific. Let's go back to Michael if we can. So here we are in beautiful Singapore, dynamic Singapore. Currently, there are no Asian banks yet signed up to the Poseidon Principles, despite Asian banks playing a key role in ship finance. Do you expect that Asian banks will be signing up to the principles?
Yes, absolutely. We expect some to sign fairly soon. What we have to understand is these sort of issues go to the even board level of large financial institutions, because when institutions make commitments on environmental policy, they have to be very thoughtful about it. And so each institution has their own processes, and particularly, I won't name countries, but particularly some countries in Asia, are very thoughtful about these things and just take longer than some other nationalities. The Europeans have been quite far advanced in this. Some countries, France, Holland particularly, have been very focused on this agenda for some time. But we're confident that we will get 80 to 90% of all serious shipping lenders signed up to the principles during the course of the next 12 months. The key thing is going to be getting the emissions data, applying it to the trajectory, applying it to our portfolios, and reporting during 2020. So we have plenty of time to do that. I think the other thing I'd just say on this is, to the transparency point, there is the great advantage for this industry is the transparency that the Paris Agreement gave to shipping and aviation to manage its own emissions. And so the good work that everyone in this room, with people from the outside, can do in lowering emissions, supported by the financial institutions, is what will make this industry not just transparent, but also, in my view, profitable. And I think in that context, there is no reason for any serious financial institution not to sign these principles. And one might expect a virtuous circle that hopefully the charterers will say, do we want to charter your vessel if it's not financed by a bank that has not signed the Poseidon Principles? So if the regulators start actually applying climate change criteria to the way they regulate financial institutions, I think we'll have every bank signed up to these principles.
Yeah, terrific. Let's go back to Kristin. Actually, I'm still thinking, Michael, about your comment of your projection of 80 to 90% of the industry being signed up in the next 12 months. So next year, I'm going to be coming here and shaking Michael's hand and saying, congratulations. That's real leadership, and that's real dynamic power. Kristin, the focus of the Poseidon Principles is on climate alignment, but will this be the only issue that you foresee will be covered by the Poseidon Principles?
This is a good platform for new initiatives, but what is important now is actually two things. First of all, to get more banks on board, Asian, but also Americans, so we can have a much broader banking group aligned to the principles. And secondly, it is to incorporate this into reality. It is actually for the companies to start reporting it to IMO, for the information for IMO to come to the banks, for the banks to have third-party recalculating the numbers so we can use it in our portfolio, for the banks to make the models, how we put it into our portfolio, and then also how we communicate this in our annual reports, etc. So it is a process for 2020 to get this going in a practical way, so you actually can see how we report and also how our portfolios will look like and how this will affect the industry. So I think that's a very good start. And then we can, during that process, see what could be new efforts or new initiatives we could follow on from this one.
Taking it from the conceptual to the real, Thank you very much. Paul, what concrete impact has being a signature to the Poseidon Principles had in the way that you provide shipping finance?
So far, not a lot, and we hope that won't totally change. At SG, our strategy is to finance new and modern ships, and that will continue. So the underlying strategy should not necessarily change for any signatory bank. And I should say that by signing the principles, there are no obligations in terms of changing the types of deal we do. We don't impact each other's decisions at all. So we can carry on financing the ships which we want to finance for the clients we wish to support, and that will continue. That said, I think that what the Poseidon Principles will lead to is there'll be greater liquidity for those vessels which are supporting the energy transition, and that is an underlying ambition of the Poseidon Principles. It may not be an express one, but it's certainly an implied one. We will expect that in this sort of world of finite capital that exists in the banking market, and it may become even more finite with regulation, that more liquidity will be put aside for the greener vessels. But we will still refinance ships. Now, we want to support our clients. That's why we're in business. That's not going to change at all. There will be greater due diligence, though, so particularly where we are refinancing vessels, so existing vessels in our portfolio, or those that are not on our portfolio. We'll now be looking at the carbon emissions, the efficiency levels of these vessels before the offer goes out to finance them. And again, that is right. That helps us manage our portfolio. That helps us comply with the obligations, with the commitments we've made. So I see more due diligence, both in terms of new business, of course, in the reporting side. I see greater communication with our clients, communication relating to the efficiency levels of existing vessels, but that can get us closer to our clients. So it's a very, very positive thing. We'll be close to our clients. We'll be providing more liquidity, more money to our clients for the financing and refinancing of vessels.
Those are powerful incentives. Thanks very much, Paul. Everyone, please join me in thanking Michael Parker, Paul Taylor, and Kristin Holth of the Poseidon Principles.